The crystal chandelier in the Blackwood Mansion's dining room cast elegant shadows across the Christmas feast as my stepbrother Marcus's voice rang out with practiced cruelty. "Elizabeth, darling, the help eats downstairs. Wouldn't want to confuse the servants, would we?" I stood quietly beside the elaborate place settings, my Hermes scarf, worth more than Marcus's monthly trust fund allowance, draped casually around my neck. The irony of their assumption that I couldn't afford a proper Christmas outfit would become deliciously apparent in about 12 hours. "Marcus is right," my stepmother Caroline tittered, adjusting her newly purchased designer dress. "The kitchen staff might get the wrong idea. Best to maintain proper boundaries." If they only knew that while they were planning their perfect Christmas dinner, my investment firm Phoenix Capital had been systematically acquiring their debt through various shell companies. The Blackwood family fortune was about to face its day of reckoning. "Of course," I murmured, catching my father's avoiding gaze. He hadn't met my eyes since allowing Caroline to orchestrate my social demotion after inheriting my mother's estate 3 years ago. My phone buzzed discreetly in my pocket. A message from my chief financial officer. "Final debt acquisitions complete. Blackwood Industries loans are now fully controlled by Phoenix subsidiaries. Awaiting your signal." "Speaking of boundaries," Marcus continued, straightening his fake Rolex, a poor imitation of the vintage piece quietly ticking on my wrist. "We should discuss your living situation, Liz. That tiny apartment above your investment office hardly befits the Blackwood name." My tiny apartment was actually the penthouse of the building I owned, and my investment office managed more wealth than the entire Blackwood fortune had ever seen. But they'd learn that soon enough. "I manage," I replied softly, watching Caroline arrange the seating cards to exclude me from the main table. "Manages?" Caroline laughed, the sound brittle as thin ice. "Darling, you can barely keep that little investment hobby afloat. Thank goodness Marcus has taken control of the family's financial interests." My phone lit up again. Blackwood Industries credit rating downgraded. Banks calling in loans effective tomorrow morning. All controlled by Phoenix Capital. I suppressed a smile, thinking about Marcus's control of the family finances. Every major decision he'd made in the past year had been subtly manipulated by my firm, leading Blackwood Industries deeper into debt that I now owned. "Father," I attempted one last time, "perhaps we could discuss." "Elizabeth," he cut me off, still avoiding my gaze, "your stepmother has worked hard to arrange this dinner. Please don't make things difficult. Difficult. Like when he'd allowed Caroline to challenge my inheritance from my mother. Or when he'd stood silent as Marcus systematically stripped away my role in the family company. The kitchen staff is waiting," Caroline gestured dismissively. "I'm sure they've prepared something appropriate for you." My watch, the real version of Marcus's counterfeit, quietly tracked the hours until midnight, when Phoenix Capital would call in all of Blackwood Industries' loans simultaneously. "Merry Christmas then," I said quietly, turning toward the kitchen stairs. "Oh, and Liz," Marcus called after me, his voice dripping with false concern. "Don't worry about getting us presents. We know times are tight for you." If he only knew about the presents I'd prepared. Formal notices of loan default, eviction papers for the mansion, and documentation of every questionable financial decision he'd made while managing the family fortune. In the kitchen, the staff, who actually worked for my property management company, greeted me with knowing smiles. They'd been well compensated to maintain the charade until tomorrow's revelations. "Miss Blackwood," the head chef whispered, "your investment team called. Everything's proceeding as planned." I nodded, taking my seat at the small kitchen table as the sounds of laughter and clinking crystal drifted down from above. Tomorrow those sounds would be replaced by something very different. My phone buzzed one final time. All documents prepared. At midnight, Phoenix Capital becomes majority creditor of Blackwood Industries. The family's assets will be called for immediate repayment. Looking up at the ceiling, listening to my family celebrate their imagined success, I thought about how quickly fortunes could change. By this time tomorrow, they'd learn that the help they'd banished to the kitchen had become their financial judge, jury, and executioner. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served at the dinner table. It's served in the form of legally binding financial documents. And I had a whole stack of them ready to deliver. The grandfather clock in the mansion's foyer struck midnight as I sat in my real office, the penthouse suite of Phoenix Capital's headquarters. Multiple screens displayed the Blackwood family's financial empire crumbling in real time as my team executed the carefully orchestrated takeover. Ms. Blackwood, my executive assistant James entered with a thick folder. The first wave of loan recalls has been initiated. Blackwood Industries accounts are already frozen. I watched through our security feeds as emergency alerts began flooding the mansion's fax machine and email servers. Marcus, probably still sleeping off his expensive champagne, had no idea that his world was collapsing. "Has Caroline checked their accounts yet?" I asked, knowing my stepmother's morning routine of reviewing the family's financial statements over her imported coffee. "She's trying to access them now," James smiled slightly. "All cards have been declined, including her attempt to order breakfast from that French cafe she loves." My phone buzzed with a panicked text from Marcus. "Something's wrong with the banking system. All cards declined. Call me ASAP." Before I could respond, another message flashed across my screen. This one from my father's private secretary. "Sir, multiple banks are calling. They're demanding immediate repayment of all outstanding loans." I smiled, remembering Caroline's dismissive gesture toward the kitchen stairs just hours ago. The help she'd so casually dismissed now controlled every aspect of their financial existence. "Ms. Blackwood," my CFO Sarah entered, tablet in hand. "Blackwood Industries stock has been suspended from trading. The market is reacting to the loan recalls." "Of course it is," I murmured, pulling up the documents that would soon be delivered to the mansion. "How long until they realize who's behind this?" "Based on the paperwork?" Sarah grinned. "They should be figuring it out right about." My office door burst open as James rushed back in. "Ms. Blackwood, your father and Marcus are in the lobby. They're quite agitated." I stood, smoothing my Saint Laurent suit. Another piece they'd assumed was a knockoff at Christmas dinner. Perfect timing. "Send them up." Through the security feeds, I watched my father pace in the lobby, his usual commanding presence shattered as he took in the scale of Phoenix Capital's real operation. The tiny investment office occupied one of the city's most prestigious buildings, a building I now owned. "Elizabeth," my father burst into my office, then stopped short at the view of our trading floor below. What is all this?" "This." I gestured to the empire humming with activity. "This is what a little investment hobby looks like, father. Welcome to Phoenix Capital's headquarters." Marcus stumbled in behind him, his face pale as he scanned the wall of screens showing Blackwood Industries' financial destruction. "But you work in that small office above the coffee shop." "That's just one of our satellite locations," I replied calmly. "Though I do enjoy watching you drive past it every day in that leased Ferrari you can't actually afford." My phone lit up with another alert. Caroline was attempting to access the mansion's emergency funds, accounts that now belonged to Phoenix Capital. "The loans," my father said weakly. "They're all being called in at once." "By various subsidiaries of Phoenix Capital," I confirmed. "Those tight times you all assumed I was experiencing? I was actually buying up every piece of debt Blackwood Industries created under Marcus's brilliant management." As if on cue, the screens displayed breaking news. "Blackwood Industries faces immediate loan recalls, major financial crisis looming." "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "Our credit lines are all controlled by me now," I finished for him. "Every loan, every mortgage, every credit card. Even that fake Rolex you bought on the company account. I own that debt too." Their faces showed the dawning realization that their Christmas dinner mockery had been directed at the person who now controlled their entire financial destiny. Now, I sat back down at my desk. I believe Caroline should be waking up to some interesting account notifications. You might want to be there when she learns exactly where the help has ended up. The next hour would change everything, and I was just getting started. Part 3 of my plan would teach my family the true meaning of financial control. And it would begin with a very different kind of Christmas present. Sometimes the best revenge isn't eating in the kitchen. It's owning the entire house. And the Blackwood Mansion's deed was already being transferred to my name. The winter sun cast long shadows across my office as I watched Caroline's hysterical reaction through the mansion's security cameras. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she tried credit card after credit card. Each one declined, while emergency notifications flooded her phone. Ms. Blackwood, James entered with another stack of documents. The mansion's utility transfers are complete. And the staff, who, as you know, actually work for us, have begun the inventory process. I nodded, monitoring the real-time data showing the complete dismantling of the Blackwood family's financial facade. Their entire empire, built on inherited wealth and maintained through Marcus's reckless management, was crumbling in spectacular fashion. Has the moving company arrived? I asked, knowing Caroline's precious antiques, most of them fakes she'd overpaid for, would need to be assessed for auction. Yes, ma'am. They're waiting for your signal. And? James smiled slightly. Caroline is attempting to access the wine cellar. The one you actually own. My phone buzzed continuously with messages from various family members, each more desperate than the last. Caroline, the cards aren't working. Fix this immediately. Marcus, someone's hacked our accounts. All assets frozen. Father, Elizabeth, please. We need to talk. Caroline again, the staff isn't listening to me. I am still the lady of this house. I smiled, remembering her condescending smile as she directed me to the kitchen last night. Now her precious mansion, along with everything in it, belonged to the help she'd so casually dismissed. Ms. Blackwood, Sarah appeared with an update. Blackwood Industries board has called an emergency meeting. The loan recalls have triggered every default clause in their contracts. Perfect timing, I replied, standing to adjust my outfit. A custom Balmain suit that cost more than Caroline's entire wardrobe. Send in the forensic accounting team. I want every questionable transaction Marcus authorized documented for the SEC. Through the security feeds, I watched Caroline pace in the mansion's grand foyer, her designer heels clicking frantically on the marble floors she no longer owned. The investment hobby she'd laughed at had systematically acquired everything she valued. Elizabeth, my father's voice cracked as he stepped forward in my office. Surely we can discuss this. We're family. Family. I turned to face him, years of suppressed anger crystallizing into cold purpose. Like when you let Caroline challenge Mother's will. Or when you stood silent as Marcus stripped away my role in the company. Marcus slumped in a chair, his fake Rolex catching the light. The company, there must be something left. Nothing, I stated flatly, pulling up comprehensive financial reports on the screens. Every asset, every property, every account is now controlled by Phoenix Capital. Your brilliant financial management created so much debt, it was almost too easy to acquire it all. My phone lit up with another alert. The moving company had begun cataloging the mansion's contents. Caroline's screams could be heard in the background of the security feed. But where will we live? Marcus asked, his voice small. The mansion is mine, I completed his thought. Along with the summer house in Hamptons, the apartments in Paris and London, and every other property you mortgage to maintain your lifestyle. The eviction notices are being delivered now. The screens showed Caroline receiving the formal documents, her perfect composure finally shattering as she realized the extent of her fall from grace. However, I continued, relishing their rapt attention, I'm feeling generous. Phoenix Capital owns several modest apartment complexes. I'm sure we can find you something appropriate, the kind of place where the help usually lives. The irony of my words wasn't lost on any of them. Father seemed to age years in minutes as he watched his dynasty crumble. Your mother, he began weakly, would be proud. I cut him off. She built her fortune through smart investments and hard work. Everything you let Caroline and Marcus destroy. I've simply reclaimed it with considerable interest. The screens displayed more breaking news. Blackwood Industries collapses under debt recall. Phoenix Capital emerges as major creditor. The Christmas dinner. Marcus suddenly spoke up, realization dawning. You knew all this was coming. Of course I did, I replied calmly. Every time you mocked my small investment office, every time Caroline sent me to eat in the kitchen, I was actually orchestrating your downfall. Rather poetic, don't you think? My phone buzzed with an urgent message. Caroline was attempting to remove artwork from the mansion. James, I called out, please have security escort Mrs. Blackwood away from the Monet in the main hall. She seems to have forgotten it now belongs to Phoenix Capital. The next hours were a blur of activity as my team executed the complete dismantling of the Blackwood family's life. Caroline was escorted from the mansion, Marcus's sports cars were repossessed, and my father watched helplessly as his world was systematically stripped away. Ms. Blackwood, James entered with another update. The new apartment units are ready. Basic furnished accommodations as requested. Quite a change from the mansion. Perfect, I smiled, remembering all those nights eating alone in the kitchen. Make sure they understand no staff, no luxury amenities. Just the basics. Caroline burst into my office, her makeup streaked with tears. You can't do this to us. That's our home. Was your home, I corrected her. Now it's just another asset in Phoenix Capital's portfolio. Though I must say the kitchen is quite cozy. Perfect for family dinners. The security feeds showed moving trucks arriving at the mansion, ready to clear out decades of accumulated wealth. My team had already identified numerous artworks and antiques that Caroline had purchased with embezzled company funds. Your new accommodations are ready, I continued, handing them each a key. 3-room apartments in our standard residential complex. The kind of place you thought I lived in. There's even a shared kitchen facility, very cozy for Christmas dinner. Marcus stared at the key in horror. Standard residential? But we're Blackwoods. No, I corrected him, I'm a Blackwood. You're just former residents of property now owned by Phoenix Capital. Consider yourselves lucky. Most people who create this much debt end up with much worse. The screens showed more breaking news. Blackwood family fortune revealed as House of Cards. Phoenix Capital CEO exposes years of financial mismanagement. From kitchen to boardroom, Elizabeth Blackwood's strategic takeover.